Hello? Okay. Is this good?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So, you ready?
Let's do this.
Not too bad. Okay, good evening, everybody. My name is Mr. Luis Fayat, and this is my friend.
I'm Chris Kang, and we are both, as Mr. Valencia said, teachers here at the Prep. Tonight, we're going to be talking to you about our interpretation of the phrase "on the edge."
But before we get into that, a little bit of background about ourselves. So, not only are we both, as Mr. Valencia said, not only are we both teachers here, but we both have the common experience of having served in the Peace Corps. Now, a quick explanation on that. The Peace Corps is an organization run by the United States government. The goal is to send trained men and women abroad to live in interesting countries, and the idea is to exchange skills, knowledge, but primarily facilitate a cultural exchange. Ultimately, you come back from the country you served in, and you spend the rest of your life doing what we call the third goal, which is you exchange your ideas, your experiences with the people around you. And through that, you improve upon the understanding of people both from where you served and where you are now.
And so, Noah Jacobs approached both of us, I guess, a few months ago and asked if we'd be willing to talk to you guys tonight. And we said, sure. And and he told us the theme of On the Edge, and we thought about what is the on the edge thing mean. And I thought to myself, at first you think, okay, on the edge is like being on the edge of some cliff or some abyss, radical or something like that. But the more we gave thought to it, and actually the more I talked to my friends that were in the Peace Corps with me, we came up with this idea. In fact, a good friend and Peace Corps volunteer that served with me in the Solomon Islands gave me this one science phrase. He's a biology teacher, and that word is ecotone. I think we have a slide here defining what ecotone is. And basically what I want you to take from this definition is, an ecotone is a transitional zone between two plant communities, like a grassland and a forest. Well, we want to try and convey how our time in the Peace Corps makes us like those trees or the plants that are on that border between the grassland and the forest, so that we can get the benefits of both the grassland and the forest.
So first, we're talking about these two different plant communities. As you saw in the picture, it was the meadow, and then there was the forest. So our perspective is, first we came from the meadow. And as people going into the Peace Corps, from my perspective, I was coming from a point in my life where I was feeling very disillusioned with what I had thought my life was going to turn out to be. I had dedicated a lot of time to my academics. I really enjoyed science and engineering. I had worked a little bit, didn't really find that satisfying, and obviously I felt a little bit of disillusionment. I felt lost. I didn't really know what I was going to do. I found the Peace Corps the perfect opportunity to really take a huge jump in a direction that I just had never taken before. And I thought, what a better way to really gain a different perspective when I had spent so much time and I really didn't get anything from it. So I was looking for this new experience, this moment that was really going to transform my life. And I know that sounds high and mighty. I don't know about your motives.
I'm shallow. I wanted to travel. I grew up in West Virginia. I think you saw my bio. I grew up in West Virginia, went to West Virginia University. I got my degree, and pretty much I didn't have a lot of money, dirt poor, but I wanted to travel. One of the friends that I made when I was in university, I had a friend who had just returned from Kenya, who she was a volunteer there, and we were working in a math tutoring center together, and during the downtime she would talk to me about all of her experiences and some anecdotes about what she did in Kenya, and I just fell in love with the idea of joining the Peace Corps. Well, lo and behold, a recruiter for the Peace Corps came on the campus one day. I met with him, and a couple of months later I get an all-expense one-way trip ticket to San Francisco, and then off to the South Pacific. Has anybody ever heard of the Solomon Islands in here? Raise your hand. Oh, look at that! Nice, well done, good. Yeah, you know what? I'll tell you a little bit. I joined the Peace Corps in 1993 is when I arrived. I was sworn in as a volunteer in the beginning of '94. But before that, I had never heard of the Peace Corps. In fact, or not the Peace Corps, the Solomon Islands. And I just woke up one day and I'm like, I'm in the Peace I'd never heard of the Solomons, the only island I've heard of was Guadalcanal because there was a lot of fighting that went on during World War II. In fact, up until 2 weeks before I left for the Peace Corps, my mom went out and got a got a video from the library about the Solomons, and that was the first time I'd ever heard of the Solomon Islands. So, but anyway, so off I flew to the Solomons. As you can see, there's a little map of where I was at, and so that's why I joined. What about you?
Well, had anyone ever heard of Mozambique before? Okay, all right, that's good too. Now, most Peace Corps volunteers, as Chris just said, when they find out where they're going, the first question is, where is this country? Like, where exactly am I going? And so I was able to end up here towards the bottom half of Africa, and one of the things about Mozambique that I learned right away was that it was going to be somewhat similar to here in Miami. Turns out that when it comes to some of the physical hardships and differences that you kind of anticipate, one of them is climate. Now you think Africa, hot, humid, but I'm sure that us here, we're very familiar with that, right? So that wasn't that big of a transition, but there were other things that were kind of a bigger deal. So for example, one of the first impressions that I got of Mozambique was just how much trash there was. The first place we came into was Maputo, which was the capital, and I'll never forget that. I was just like, there's just so much trash everywhere. There were people living in the trash, like you just couldn't avoid it. They were even cultivating their food, okay, because they just needed the space, and so that was just very difficult. I don't know what some of the more difficult physical hardships that you had to deal with.
With the physical hardship, again, we were about 5 degrees south of the equator, again, just north of Australia. And so if you took, Miami weather and added about 5 degrees and about 1,000% humidity, and that's 365 days a year, that's what it was like there. But again, it was a developing country, and when I first arrived into the capital, again, very similar ideas. I think you'll see some pictures that they're just scrolling through of some of the scenes. One of them is a marketplace where people sell their fruits and vegetables, and you can see that there's not much distinguishing what you buy as fruit or vegetable and then the trash. I mean, again, it's just, and that's one of the things is the cultural difference that you encounter, and it's a shock at first.
No, but not only that, when you first get there, you immediately start to readjust yourselves to this new environment, and it's not just about the things that you see, whether it's hot or humid or if there's a ton of trash. It's something as simple as you get up and what am I going to have for breakfast? And a lot of us are very used to popping things in the microwave. I didn't have a microwave for 2 years. A lot of us are just going to hop in the shower real quick. Turns out it took me at least 20 minutes to prepare a hot bath because I had to heat up the water myself. I was able to take washing my clothes. Didn't have a washer and dryer. A lot of the amenities, a lot of the things that I realized that I was used to without even thinking about it, all of a sudden they were just gone. And all of a sudden those things that take 5 minutes that we don't even think about, they became realities that I had to deal with on a daily basis if I just wanted to function at a basic level.
Absolutely. For the 2 years I was at the school where I was teaching, I basically had a cinder block an evolution block that was probably about maybe 2 feet higher than this. And I would stand on this cement fixture with a little red bucket, and I would pour a cup of water over my head. By the way, wearing clothing, I was not, out in public naked. In fact, for 2 years, I took a shower in clothing because, again, you had to. I was out in the open, and I think you might see a picture of it later. But I would stay there, and that's how I took a shower for 2 years. But again, you get used to it. In fact, I never had a hot shower because I didn't have, I didn't have electricity or running water. I had water catchment tanks for my source of water, but that's something you get used to, and it just became part of everyday existence.
And when it comes to the physical differences that we've talked about right now, you realize how quickly they kind of disappear. I think a lot of us, when we have physical hardships here in the United States, we rap about them, we deal with them, but we realize how quickly, sometimes without realizing it, how quickly we move on. And what became a bigger, what's the word I want to use here? A bigger impact was realizing the cultural differences that persisted throughout those 2 years. And those were the differences, those were the moments that really began to change both Chris and myself, because those were moments that every day you really had to wake up and you had to check yourself. You had to think about all the things that you brought with you to this new environment, to this new culture, and you had to really realize how important were they, how valid were they? You know, were your ideas and thoughts more important or less important than the people that were in your community? And I think one of the moments that I recall was there were other volunteers that we would spend time with, and oftentimes we would gather a lot, and a few of the community members in my neighborhood, they would often talk about how they thought it was very strange that the men and the women, the male and female volunteers, would spend so much time together. Okay, because in Mozambique, one of the biggest differences that I experienced is that people, especially couples, didn't necessarily spend time together in public. You couldn't really tell if people were together, were a couple, when you saw them out on the street. A man could go down to the market, taking down one path, and his girlfriend, his other partner, takes a completely different route, and you just, once again, one of those moments where you just ask yourself, why exactly is this happening? Now, I don't know if you have any experiences where you were just like, what is going on here?
Actually, it's very similar in Mozambique to the Solomons. In fact, I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about there. Yeah, if you had a relationship, first of all, they don't recognize things like boyfriends or girlfriends. They're supposedly non-existent, right? And again, the men basically stayed with the men, and the women stayed with the women. And depending on, again, where I was at it, their cultures changed slightly. But I'm going to show you an example of one of the things that was a real culture shock for me. We were warned about this beforehand, but I want to use my man Luis here as an example. In the Solomon Islands, you shake hands with one solid palm. Ready? Nervous? Yeah, that was a big one. Yeah, in the Solomons, it's very traditional for a man to hold hands with another man. When you shake hands with one solid pump, and then you would hold hands during the conversation. And the first time, I remember, one of the best days that I remember there was we'd gone through the rainforest, and we'd gone to a waterfall, and a local had taken us there, tour guide, and he was a really nice guy, and we were talking and whatnot, and we played and jumped in the waterfall all day, and then we were making our way back downstream, and we're walking, and we're talking, and all of a sudden, and again, I was warned about, he grabs my hand, and he wants to hold my hand as we're walking down the stream, and it was everything I could take. It was everything I could take to keep holding his hand. But you know what? After, I would say maybe 3, 4, 5 minutes, that apprehension, it faded. And all of a sudden it became 2 guys walking down this stream having a conversation. And for the rest of our time in the Peace Corps in the Solomon Islands, it was just, and to this day, my friends, when they come to visit me, will hold hands. But I see that we have to rush things, move things along here. But culturally, things were very different. And again, I think that's the biggest part that that I'm taking away from my experience there.
No, and then at the same time, looking at all these differences, they also start to fade away. And eventually you start to see similarities. You start to realize, from your prior experience, from your history, moments that you were having in your country, whether it was in Mozambique or in the Solomon Islands, that you could relate to and connect with in your past. And it all of a sudden became, for example, as teachers, how the students that I taught in Mozambique, and I'm sure that you feel the same way, the students that I taught in Mozambique, just the same issues that they were going through, the same aspirations. Maybe in a different context. I know a lot of us here, especially at Gulliver, we want to get into a good college. A lot of my students were just wondering if they were going to be able to get into a college. You're talking about a situation where 900 students could apply for 30 spots at a university, and that was it. And it took a lot. So, and you just realize that little by little, that it's not about they're Mozambicans, I'm from the United States. about what they're struggling with, you know, what their families are dealing with, and you know what I'm trying to deal with, and how those things just kind of come together. How, the commonalities that we just have, no matter where we are in this world.
Yeah, again, you know, Luis said, you know, teaching in the Solomons, the kids would ask me the same concerns that my students here at Gulliver or wherever I've taught have asked me. You know, they always like to compare themselves to Solomon. Say, you know, how do we compare to the kids in the United States? My kids here, how do we compare to fourth period, or how do we compare to seventh period? You know, how do we compare to years past? You know, and those concerns are the same. You know, I will say one drastic thing. Again, just like in Luis's case, you know, the Solomons resources and funding and teachers were at a limited were limited. And so like in the 6th grade, all the 6th graders take a test, and only the top 2/3 would get to go to the 7th grade, and the bottom third drops out, and they do the same thing in the 9th grade, and then they did the same thing in the 11th grade. And so there's really, you know, competition in a developing country, even more so I think than what we have here for college apps and whatnot. So again, we all students wherever have a lot of pressure on them, and I realize that.
No, but I think, and then, you know, you spend 2 years there, and then a bigger moment happens, you come back. And that's where you come back home, and home is no longer really your home. So many things have changed, and you really feel like a stranger in your own home, as they say. And I just remember, and I still deal with this, because I came back in October of 2012. So this is about to be 2 years of having come back, and I'm still not necessarily comfortable with going into Publix, going into the supermarket, and having 50 options for the kind of cereal that I want to eat in the morning, or all the different types of milk. And it's not because, you know, too much option is bad. It's just, you know, I was coming from a situation where, you know, I was just dealing with the basics. And another thing was just the whole, like I left right at the beginning of the iPhone explosion. And so coming back, it was very interesting for me to deal with the fact that, you know, we've become very integrated with our technology. And I had just spent 2 years, you know, being away from technology. I mean, I know you got an even crazier story.
Yeah, again, I left the United States in '93, and I got back. Actually, I stayed for another 2 years after the Peace Corps in the country, and so I got back in '98. And you know, when I left back in '93, there was no such thing as the internet, or at least not to me. And there were no cell phones. And when I got back, you know, I remember being with my sister, and she pulls out this big white brick. And I'm like, what's that? And she's like, oh, it's a cell phone. And I'm like, all right, what's a cell phone? But that was, yeah, the technology, I mean, that was a huge difference. But actually, I think we're getting close here. So ultimately, you know, we had some great experiences in the Peace Corps. Things, and again, every day I think back to the relationships and the friends that I had and the experiences I had. But you know, again, going back to the idea of us being in the Peace Corps and this idea of existing in two different communities. You know, I look at how I am today and the decisions I made and my priorities. And you know, I thank my parents every day for who I am. I mean, again, I am my father. But I also think that a lot of decisions that I make now are based off of the Solomon culture. You know, again, I'm more than just a mortgage payer. I'm more than just a man saving for retirement. You know, I like to enjoy my day. You know, and I think I get that from the Solomons.
No, and I think if there's one thing that we want you guys to take away from this is it's just the fact that as we were talking about this, we kind of realized that okay, this may seem like an extraordinary story, you know, halfway around the world in both directions, but ultimately the sum of this extraordinary experience that we call, you know, our Peace Corps experience is really just it's the summation of these individual ordinary moments. Okay, ordinary moments that you can find anywhere. You don't have to go halfway around the world to be able to find these moments and really open yourself up to these new experiences. Right here in Miami, you can take a step out of your own comfort zone You don't have to go halfway around the world to be able to change your perspective on things, to meet new people, and to challenge yourself in new and exciting ways.
So again, going back to one more analogy here, when you see that forest from the grassland and it looks intimidating and scary, you hear the scary noises, once you get inside, you realize that it's, you can adapt and you can exist. And so, for example,
you can pretty much do anything. Once you're comfortable in that ecotone, in that boundary, you can pretty much do anything. You can travel halfway around the world. You can try to learn a new language, or you can take the time to spend 18 minutes with a bunch of people you don't even know and talk to them about your life. So, on that note, thank you all very much.